No more three Bob Fergusons, or as Kyle T put it in the comments, no mas tres Fergies. Yes, so just before the deadline yesterday to withdraw your name, before it would appear on a primary ballot, the two other Bob Fergusons in the race for Washington governor opted to do so. I mean, clearly they listened to our show yesterday and thought, well, if Brandi thinks I ought to take my name out, then I must take my name out. No, I'm sure they made these decisions independently. In fact, I had heard that one of the Bobs made it pretty early in the day on Monday. I'll get to his statement in a moment because it was actually pretty wonderful. And then, of course, Bob Ferguson, the Attorney General Bob Ferguson, let's clarify, came out, had a press conference flanked by a former King County prosecutor threatening legal action, threatening to go after these Bobs if they didn't withdraw their names, threatening to go after Glenn Morgan, the conservative government watchdog who set up this whole thing, and ultimately asking for special treatment from the Secretary of State's office, which we'll get to in a moment. You know, yesterday was Bob Ferguson got his day as the victim. He got his day as the victim yesterday. We covered it. I gave my whole spiel about why I thought the names should be withdrawn and how it was funny, but it wasn't right morally, and it also, I think, would backfire. But now we move on from that, and I want to take a deep dive into some of the things that Bob Ferguson said at this press conference that just show what a horrible leader he would be, who only looks out for himself and only looks out for his best interests and only cares about law and order when he's the one who's a victim. First, I want to read again this, I love this so much. This press release from Bob Ferguson, one of the other Bob Fergusons, the first one to decide on Monday to withdraw his name. Because I love how much this legit sounds like a real candidate. Totally, he was treating it like that. But some of the things he says, I think, are very valid. So this from one of the other Bob Fergusons. Hello, fellow Washingtonians. It is with a heavy heart and under duress that I am withdrawing from the governor's race. For 20 years, I wore the uniform of the U.S. Army and defended this great nation. I am and will always be grateful for the opportunity to serve and work alongside great many Americans that also wanted to protect this country. At the time, little did I know the greatest threat to my family and myself would come from another that also carries my name. Damn, shots fired. After my candidacy was announced, I was faced with harassment and legal action if I did not withdraw from the race. I was publicly labeled a, quote, threat to democracy by another candidate and his supporters. In a typical hypocritical fashion, this other candidate's actions are the true threat to democracy. I believe this shows that the other candidate fears he has not effectively done enough to stand out, or that he thinks voters are not competent enough to think for themselves. The threats made to my family and I, along with these shady tactics used to deliver messages, do not frighten or intimidate me. It is unfair to my family, friends, and supporters to deal with bullish behavior by someone who is too afraid to stand toe-to-toe with me. For that reason, I rescind my candidacy. At this time, I do not offer an endorsement for any other candidate. I hope that every voter will use logic and reason when casting their votes, and that you choose who is best for you, your family, and your values. I feel that the current administration and all associated with it have shown numerous times that they do not care about the voice of the people. They continuously feed us scraps to keep us content while only pushing their personal agenda. Car tabs, anyone? I do not think that the current Attorney General will be any different as governor. Our state is the finest in the nation, but hangs precariously on the edge of sinking under poor leadership. I wish you all the best and urge you all to make your voices heard. Sincerely, Robert Ferguson. I want him to be governor. I love this. I mean, what a well thought out statement, and someone who fought for the country. And he makes a good point there about, fights for the country, defends the country, and then is labeled a threat to democracy by Attorney General Bob Ferguson. And I've already said my piece on the thing. It was obviously a shtick to design to cipher votes away from the Attorney General. So I don't support it for that reason. But I think he brings up some good points there and Bob Ferguson, when you talk about threat to our democracy. I mentioned it briefly on the show yesterday, but I really feel like I should have hammered it home a little bit more instead of being so sappy and feeling bad for Bob. Where was Bob Ferguson when our right to initiative and referendum was under attack from the Washington State Democratic Party for the majority of last year? Where was Bob Ferguson when we were being protested and harassed for lawfully gathering signatures for a referendum? Where was he when there were tip lines put out encouraging harassment and stalking of signature gatherers? So you say you care about our democracy and protecting our democracy, and you're going to stand up for our democracy when it's at peril, but only, I guess, when it benefits you? That's not someone who I have any faith in as a leader. And this is someone who erodes our constitutional rights. Someone who, in the case of Tim Eyman, used every ounce of power and influence and millions in taxpayer funds to go after a political enemy and ruin his personal life and his professional life, and is now, if you read between the lines, probably going to try to do that to Glenn Morgan. So look, is the stunt with the three Bobs bad? Yeah. But in comparison to all the things that Attorney General Bob Ferguson has done or has not done when he should have, it pales in comparison. Truly. So now that this is behind us, I want to focus in on some things that Bob Ferguson said yesterday. I reminded you just before our show came on yesterday, he had a press conference at Kerry Park in Seattle, which I kind of laughed because he was booed at Kerry Park by someone, like jeered at. I'm like, wow, in the heart of Seattle on Queen Anne nonetheless, Queen Anne Hill, around all the liberal elites, Bob Ferguson got booed at Kerry Park. That was kind of funny. But so a few things. Let me first play this clip where, and he said over and over, I don't want them to be charged criminally. I don't want to go after these other two Bob Fergusons, but I will. Here's the moment.
If they do not do the right thing, though, and they are surely aware of the legal implications, we will have no choice but to take more serious steps and ask local prosecutors to do the right thing and pursue further action.
So because it's him, because it's his political future in peril, he would, as Bob Ferguson, the Attorney General, who has all sorts of allies in these prosecutors' offices, he would ask them to do the right thing and seek a Class B felony against these Bob Fergusons. An Attorney General, the state's chief prosecutor, who doesn't give a damn about when you and I are victimized, he could not care any less. I think it's very fitting that the sirens are raging behind him. Just a small indicator of what Bob Ferguson and politicians like him have done to this state when it comes to public safety. I go back to Bob Ferguson now all of a sudden on the campaign trail saying he didn't support rolling back police pursuits. Meanwhile, he stayed silent on that issue for 3 years. How many people have been victimized by individuals driving stolen vehicles, committing smash and grab burglaries, hitting and killing innocent people on our roadways, using those stolen vehicles to perpetrate violent crime, and police can't pursue them? Bob Ferguson hasn't shown for one moment that he cares about pursuing criminal charges or cares about law and order or justice when it's you and I, when it's the little peons. But when it's him, when he's the victim of a potential crime, he's going to hold a press conference at Kerry Park, and he's going to call all the media to whine and complain about it and demand that something be done. That something be done for him. Do you see this? Do you see the hypocrisy of it? Please, even if you support Bob Ferguson, please, you have to see that he thinks he gets special treatment. All of us, we can get victimized, we could die. He doesn't care. But when it's him, special press conference. Special press conference with the city of Seattle behind him. How many times in the last 3, 4, 5 years as our public safety crisis absolutely spiraled out of control, could it have been incredibly advantageous for Bob Ferguson to stand up at a press conference as the Attorney General and say, enough is enough. Enough is enough. We have record crime rates. The stolen vehicle crisis is out of control. We've got people dying at record rates with needles in their arms. Enough is enough. I'm the chief law enforcer of the entire state of Washington, and this is unacceptable. And we have to make sure that people aren't being victimized, that prosecutors are filing charges. We have to do something. He didn't do it once. Not once when it mattered the most. He didn't speak about police defunding. You know, the retail theft crisis happening. He didn't speak out about it in 2020 when stores were being looted in downtown Seattle, in the heart of the city he calls home. No, but when it was politically advantageous, a year and a half later, he started a retail theft task force. And what did he do? He had a press conference about how great he is in starting a retail theft task force a year and a half after it actually could have made a difference. The audacity. The audacity of this man. And again, he's in the right on the ballot issue. I've already said that. But the audacity of this man to threaten to go to prosecutors to seek felony charges when he's the victim because he's worried about his political career and his dream upon dreams of being the governor. It is shockingly void of any semblance of self-awareness. It's really wild stuff. Man, I wish people could see past political ideology to see what these political elites think of themselves and think of us. And there are Republicans out there who, they're not in this state, but other states who I'm sure are the same. It's wild. So one more thing, because he's above everyone else. He does believe inherently he's entitled to special treatment, right? Because these Bobs, that's their name, Bob Ferguson. Both of them, their legal true name. If they want to run a campaign for governor, truly, they have every right to. Now, if they're doing it to dupe voters and that can be proven, yes, that's a Class B felony. But they do have every right. If they want to mount even a last-minute legitimate campaign, they have every right lawfully to do that. But at his press conference yesterday, when it wasn't clear whether the two Bobs would drop out under these threats, Bob Ferguson, the Attorney General, said if they didn't, he would seek special treatment on the ballot from the Secretary of State, Steve Hobbs.
So number one, we're asking the Secretary of State to include the candidate occupations next to the three Bob Fergusons. Number two, we're asking that the Secretary of State have these other two Robert Fergusons listed as Robert Ferguson with their middle initial or possibly their middle name as well. So I would be the only Bob Ferguson on the ballot. Number three, and especially important, after the drawing of straws on Friday afternoon, one of these Bob Fergusons will appear second on the ballot. The other will appear third on the ballot, and I appear number 13 on the ballot. So we're asking the Secretary of State to either move my name up, sort of second essentially, above those two, or move them down below me. Either way, I'm good with either spot, right? But the three names should be together so any voter will see, wait a second, there's three Fergusons here, something's going on.
So he wants special treatment. He wants something to be done for him that wouldn't be allowed for other people. You go through this process of drawing names. This happens in every race. There's 30 people in the race for governor, and that's what it is. It is basically a draw of the hat to see where you're going to end up on the ballot. He happened to end up below the other two Bob Fergusons. And if they hadn't dropped out, he was hoping the Democratic Secretary of State would just take his name and put it right above him. As if that would be fair to any of the other candidates in the race who have nothing to do with this debacle. And above that, he wants Attorney General next to his name, so people know. There's a reason why you cannot put the political title of someone next to their name on a ballot, because it indicates to voters, well, that's the incumbent, and there's this thought that gives them an unfair advantage. So he was asking for, quite literally, an unfair advantage. This guy has no shame. This guy has no shame. And again, I don't feel like I need to continue to go back and preface it that I think that he's right on the front that, their names need to be taken off, and now they are. But now we can look back in hindsight and see how entitled he felt. How entitled he felt. You can break the rules for me. You can create special rules for me. I'm the victim. We're going to push to have these people prosecuted. This guy cannot be the governor. I don't care who you vote for. Look, vote for who you want to vote for. Just not Bob Ferguson. But in all seriousness, if you want democratic policies and you cannot foresee yourself voting for a Republican, maybe there's an issue you feel very strongly about, abortion, whatever it is, and you really feel like I'm just taking a moral stand, vote for another Democrat. any person, every candidate of the 30 would be better than Bob Ferguson. Every single one of them. Vote for Mark Mullet. If you really are a tried and true blue Democratic voter, will never vote for a Republican, vote for Mark Mullet. Anyone else besides Bob Ferguson. Because this is a man who at his core believes he's better than you, believes he's more deserving than you, believes that he's above the law, and believes he is entitled to special treatment. It's truly insane.